welcome back to my corner. We're now on day 11 of making our sweater, and today we're going to be working on our button band that has the buttonholes, which goes on obviously the opposite side of where we set our buttons. So I could have included this in the other video, but buttonholes are just a completely different thing. So I wanted you guys to have this video that you can go back to as many times as you needed.
Okay, so basically before you start making your buttonhole, you obviously have to know how big that buttonhole is going to be. So to determine that size, what you do, and you can simply do this when you've casted on all your stitches. I have a few rows just for the purposes of teaching. So once you have the number of stitches that you had here, you're going to cast that same number on here, because obviously we need our button bands to be of the same size. So whatever number that is, mine is 10, whatever number yours is, that's the number of stitches that you're going to cast on again. So once you have those stitches casted on and you have them evenly spaced out, because we want to get an accurate reading, you're going to take your work and you're going to lay it on where the button is. And we're going to count the number of stitches that it takes to get the diameter of our buttonhole. So mine is 5. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gets the size of my button. Now when you're making a buttonhole, you obviously don't want to make it too small that your button doesn't fit, and you don't want to make a buttonhole that's too big where if you were to close your cardigan, your button would slip out. So in order to get the perfect size button, you simply subtract a stitch from that number of stitches that it takes to get the size of your button. So mine is 5, so my buttonhole is going to be 4 stitches, and that'll make sure that my button will go in and not come out, unless I want it to, unless I'm the one taking it out. So now that I have that number, once you've determined that number, keep that number in mind, because that will be super important, obviously, when we're making our buttonhole. So when I measure to see where I need to start, on what row I need to start, all I do is knit until I'm halfway through my button. So as you can see, here's this work, here's the button band where I have my button sewed on, and you can see that I'm halfway up my button, about halfway. So this is the row where I'm going to begin making my buttonhole. And the good thing is that we're working in garter stitch, which is simply just knit stitches, so it'll be easier once we go back into our pattern. We won't have to worry about some complicated pattern that we're doing. We're just going to simply be doing knit stitches. So here I am doing my knit stitches. If I can get my needle through. This is why we don't knit so tight. So make sure a needle goes in nice and easy. Okay. So this is where I'm going to start to make my buttonhole, because we want it to be in the middle-ish, obviously. So that's in the middle as we can get it. So our first step to making our buttonhole is, you see this yarn that we have in the back? We're going to bring that forward and not tangle it with our other needle. We're going to bring it forward. And then we're going to act as if we're going to purl stitch, but we're not actually going to make a purl stitch. We're going to act like we are. So when our yarn is to the front, we are going to slip this stitch, this first stitch, from the left needle to the right needle. So we're going to act like we're going to purl stitch, but we're not actually going to do a purl stitch. We're just simply going to slip it off. So I'll do that again so you guys can see it. We're going to act like we're going to purl stitch, so we're going to bring our needle in through the front, and then we're simply passing it over. And once you've done that, you can bring the yarn that you had to the front, bring it to the back. And then we're going to do the same thing that we just did. We're going to do it again. So we're going to act like we're going to purl stitch, and we're going to slip another stitch off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing that we've done when we've casted off our panels and when we casted off our button band. We're going to not go to this first stitch, go to the second stitch, pass it over like we do when we're binding off. And we're going to do that for the number of times that that number that we got at the beginning. We're going to do that for that number of times. So mine is 4, as you remember, because it took 5 stitches to get the diameter of my button band, but I want the perfect size buttonhole, so I subtract 1. So that's how I got 4. So that was my first time. here is my second time. Here is my third time. And here is my last time, my fourth time. All right. And then what I'm gonna do, once I've casted off the number of stitches that it's gonna take to make my buttonhole, I'm gonna take this stitch and all I'm gonna do is simply pass it to my other needle. And as you can see, we've created the edge of our buttonhole. It's gonna get a nice clean look there, the beginning of our buttonhole. So now once we have this, once you've passed this stitch from the right needle to the left one, you're going to turn your work over. If I can do this gracefully. So we're gonna turn our work over, and now this yarn, it used to be in the back when we had the work on the other side, now it's in the front again. We're gonna pass it to the back. And now what we're gonna do is do this thing that's called the cable cast on method. That sounds kind of scary, but it's honestly not. So what you're going to do is you are going to place your needle in between these first two stitches. You place your needle in between, so you go in from the front to the back, and then you take your yarn and you go counterclockwise, just like when you do a knit stitch, and you bring that yarn to the front, and then what you're going to do is take your left needle and simply slip that stitch off from the right needle to the left one. So I'll do that again for you guys. It's from the front to the back in between those first two stitches. Take our yarn counterclockwise, bring that yarn to the front, and then take our left needle and slip that stitch from the right needle to the left needle. And you're going to do this for the number of times that you slipped off your stitch. So mine was 4 plus 1. So I'll be doing this 5 times, not 4. Because if you haven't noticed, you lost some stitches. So you have to make your stitches again to get to the number that you started with. So I started off with 10, and currently I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I only have 8 stitches and I need to get to 10 again. So like we did before, we go in between those first 2 stitches, bring our yarn over, bring it to the front, and slip the stitch from the right needle to the left needle. And now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I need to do this one more time to get back to my original 10 stitches. And what this is doing is this is creating the top edge of our buttonhole, because we already have the bottom one, now we need the top. So there I brought my yarn to the front, and this one's kind of tight, I don't know why. Make sure you don't do this so tight, because then it'll be kind of hard to be slipping stitches off. Hopefully I can get this. There we go. All right, so that one was kind of tight, but make sure your yarn doesn't slip off. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now that I have my 10 stitches again, what we're gonna do is turn our work over one last time, and then we are going to do that thing that we did at the beginning, because we want to close that buttonhole again, is slip a stitch from our left needle to our right one. So to close off that hole, basically you're going to bring that stitch, that second stitch, over the first one, just like when you cast off. And then you make sure your yarn's in the back. You go back into your pattern, which is just knit stitches. And you can already see that there's a hole there, but I'm going to keep doing some rows before I actually show you guys what it will look like. And see, this is why we don't knit so tight, because I noticed some of my stitches are a little tight. Maybe I'm a tight stitcher. I'm not sure. So there's always this debate on if you're a tight stitcher or a loose stitcher. I think I'm a tight one. I need to learn to knit a little more loosely. If you're an experienced knitter and have any tips, please drop them below. That will be very helpful for us that are learning to do this. And there, I finished that row. Turning our work over again. Making sure I have enough yarn here. And make sure our stitches aren't slipping off. Alright, so I've done a few rows, and as you can see, here is our buttonhole, and I'm just going to go ahead and test it out so you guys can see. When I put my button through, it fits nice and snug. Alright, so I'm coming in to the row where I have to start my second buttonhole. So what I like to do, just to make sure that I am in the middle, is I like to put in that first button just to make sure that I'm where I need to be, that I didn't knit too far, or that I didn't have to knit more. So I'm going to start here with my, make sure I'm in the frame. I'm going to start here with my garter stitches, or my garter stitch, so I'm going to start with my knit stitches here. And here is where I'm going to start my second buttonhole. And what I noticed is that you kind of want to start it a little bit more towards the beginning, because you don't want to start in the middle, because then your buttonhole is going to end up being somewhere over here. And even like next to the middle, it's still going to be kind of off to the side. So you kind of want to start it to make sure that this, you know, the edge, the start of your button is kind of over here, so that you get your buttonhole in the middle, and then you get an even amount of knit on the side. Everyone's buttonholes everyone's button bands are different lengths, obviously, because everyone's sweaters are probably different. So I can't exactly tell you like, oh, begin on this stitch, because you'll have to kind of figure that out for yourself. But again, here we are starting our buttonhole. So our first step again is to bring our yarn to the front and slip one stitch off, and then bring our yarn to the back, and then we're going to slip off the number of stitches that we're going to need to make our buttonhole. Mine is 4, so there's the first one. The second one. The third one. Here's my last one. And then I'm just going to simply slip this stitch back off to my left needle. And there I have my clean bottom edge of my buttonhole. And then we're going to turn our work over and bring this yarn to the back. And so now, since I only have 6, obviously I need to get back to my 10. But remember, it's always the number of stitches that you did for your buttonhole plus 1. I'm going to slip this stitch here. So we go in between those first 2 stitches, And then we're slipping them onto our left needle. Make sure you don't knit too tightly because then it gets kind of hard to get in between those first 2 stitches. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Need to do this 2 more times. So I started out with 10 stitches, yes, but you'll see why I need, see, this is why we don't do it so tightly. See, it's kind of getting a struggle to get in there. Oh, okay. Let's try that again. Here we go. So one more time because it's all the stitches that I did for my buttonhole plus 1. Oh, what's going on here? I think I let it go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I let it go, but that's okay because we're not perfect here. And I know sometimes, like even me, like right now, teaching you guys this, I'm still working on getting my buttonholes just right. All right, so now that we have that, we're gonna turn over our work once more. Make sure that yarn is to the back. And then we're gonna slip 1 stitch from our left needle. And to close our buttonhole, we're simply going to cast off. And here we just continue in our pattern. And then when I turn this over, then I'm just going to continue with my knit stitches until I have to do my 3rd buttonhole, which won't be for a while because that one, these first 2 are kind of really close together and then the other ones are a little more spaced out. So we do get a bit of a break because I know these can be kind of tedious and a little confusing, but it's okay. We got this. We're so close to the end of making our sweater, and then we can all flex this really awesome thing that we did because you should be extremely proud of yourself because I'm extremely proud because you guys made it this far. It's definitely something to be super proud of, especially if this is your first time knitting. I mean, I'm still a beginner, so because this has been my only project like ever. But I'm glad to know that I have acquired a new hobby that I enjoy. And hopefully you have too. Hopefully this inspires you to do other things.